Burt Lancaster, a screen legend, stood out not only for his talent but also for his intense clashes with some of Hollywood's biggest stars. These people didn't just wound him professionally, they shook Burt's personal life to its core. From being overshadowed in romantic entanglements and publicly criticized to endless arguments over politics and the craft, they left scars on Burt's soul that could never truly heal. But the question is, who were the people Burt Lancaster despised most? And were those hatreds tied to a terrifying secret he swore to take to the grave? Kirk Douglas, the thorn in a love triangle. It's undeniable that the relationship between Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas wasn't merely a showdown between two Hollywood stars. It was a fight to the death between two proud men, full of ego and no shortage of resentment. They weren't just rivals on the screen, they were enemies in real life, whose careers, love, and pride carved wounds that would never truly close. Stirring the hearts. It all began with Deborah Kerr, the alluring star whose beauty stirred the hearts of millions who became the spark in a power struggle between these two men. While Kirk Douglas flaunted himself as an ardent pursuer, Burt Lancaster drew Deborah in with his calm and the charm of a thinking man. But this wasn't just a simple contest of flirting, was it? Things escalated quickly, right on the set of From Here to Eternity in 1953, where love and work intertwined and tensions erupted. They went at each other. The moments the cameras rolled, the atmosphere on set tightened to a point you could scarcely imagine. A blow-up between Kirk and Burt ignited in a flash, crew member recalled. During a break, they went at each other like they'd been holding back for too long, cursing, shoving, as if they had nothing left to lose. This wasn't the first time a close friend of Burt revealed to journalist Peter Biskind in a 1961 interview. Burt had hated Kirk for a long time. Everyone knows Kirk can't stand not being the most prominent person in the room, but Burt is different. He hates the way Kirk always puts himself at the center of attention. An act that left them humiliated. One night after a premiere, as Deborah was chatting with Kirk, Burt reached his limit. As reported by the LA Times, Burt lunged at Kirk in the middle of the party, and a brawl broke out in front of dozens of guests. It got so wild that both were thrown out and even detained by police for disturbing the peace. Deborah Kerr had to bail them out, an act that left them humiliated. But for Burt, it wasn't remorse. It was an uncontrollable hatred for the man he viewed as his sworn enemy. Like two rabid dogs. And it didn't happen just once. Every time they crossed paths at events, they were like two rabid dogs, eyes brimming with hostility. This wasn't ordinary competition. It was a simmering struggle that never stopped. Their words, gestures, and looks all dripped with profound contempt. Another shocking story came in 1960 at the Academy Awards. When Kirk won, Burt's stare at him was as if Kirk had just stolen something immeasurably precious. The moment lasted only seconds, but everyone could tell their enmity had long surpassed mere professional rivalry. One scene in an unending saga. One night at a bar, Kirk started boastfully recounting his recent successes. Burt couldn't keep quiet any longer. He stood and shouted in Kirk's face, "You're just a loudmouth, always bragging about accomplishments you don't deserve." People around them were stunned. But for Burt, it was just one scene from an unending saga of loathing. Although they sometimes succeed together, their relationship was never a friendship. It was a war that couldn't be extinguished, a wound that wouldn't heal. In the 1960s, as both men hit rough patches in their careers, their tensions only deepened. The confrontations never ceased. So could their feud ever cool? Don't close the book yet. Another star is about to step into the arena. John Wayne, a man Burt Lancaster truly could not stand. Would Burt's clash with John Wayne be as heated as the one with Kirk? John Wayne publicly attacked each other's politics. In Hollywood's golden years, Burt Lancaster and John Wayne wouldn't just marquee names, they embodied two starkly opposed political camps. John Wayne was the symbol of conservative, rugged values, forever the hero of Westerns. while Burt Lancaster stood for liberal progressive ideas. Their feud wasn't just personal, it was an unforgiving political war, one of Hollywood's deepest wounds. The hot-button issues. Their relationship began to fracture as the hot-button issues of the 1960s shoved them into opposite corners. The civil rights movement, anti-war activism, and the fight for personal freedoms, all backed by Burt, seemed to incense John Wayne, who stood firmly on the conservative side, especially as the Vietnam War raged. Political battle didn't stop in Washington. It bled into the entertainment world, turning Hollywood into a political battleground. Interview with John Wayne. Things truly exploded in the 1960s when Life magazine ran a special interview with John Wayne in which he openly attacked Burt and other stars who supported the liberal movement. Wayne bluntly said, "They're just rebels trying to tear down the values this country was built on. All they want is to pull people into their so-called progressive movement." The harsh criticism was a gauntlet thrown, pushing the Wayne-Lancaster relationship to the brink of hatred. He fired back immediately. Burt Lancaster never yielded to conservative broadsides. He fired back immediately. In an interview with The Hollywood Reporter a few months later, Burt didn't just respond, he cut deep. "Hollywood isn't a place to preserve outdated ideas," Burt declared flatly. "We have a responsibility to lead society forward, not to sneer at those trying to change the world." It was a bucket of ice water in Wayne's face, and it didn't just fracture their personal rapport, it pushed Hollywood deeper into an unending war. The tension between them was very thick. The fight wasn't limited to public interviews. A Hollywood source revealed that in a 1968 collaboration, when the two sat down to discuss a script, their argument forced the entire production to halt. Burt called Wayne a damned conservative who only knows how to defend pointless wars. The tension was so thick that nobody could breathe, the source said. Their hatred escalated further in 1970 at the Academy Awards. After Wayne won a major prize, Burt did the unthinkable. He turned his back and refused to shake Wayne's hand. The room went silent, and everyone knew there'd be no mending this rift. A war of irreconcilable values. Burt didn't just hate Wayne, said an insider. He despised everything Wayne stood for. In the years that followed, even when they occasionally worked on the same projects, their relationship remained an open wound. It wasn't just political disagreements, it was the profound contempt Burt felt for Wayne. Their feud was more than politics, it was a war of irreconcilable values. Hollywood, with its glittering lights, out-front shadows, and backstage secrets, had always harbored wounds, and the Lancaster-Wayne conflict was one of its deepest. But tensions like these weren't limited to them. Marlon Brando, one who often stood in total opposition to Burt. At this time, the clash would be even hotter. Marlon Brando, a life of excess, and Burt Lancaster's scathing attacks. Marlon Brando, one of Hollywood's greatest, stood out for his unbridled lifestyle and refusal to follow any rules. He lived in ways most people wouldn't dare imagine. Indulgent, free, untethered by the norms set by society in Hollywood. But to Burt Lancaster, a principled man who treated his work as a creed, Marlon wasn't just a rebel, he was a wrecking ball to everything Burt held sacred. Their clash began when Burt read Brando's shocking 1962 interview in the New York Times, where Brando sneered at him as a star Hollywood propped up like a grinning doll. Burt couldn't sit still after that. A close friend recalled that when Burt heard it, he slammed the paper down and said, "That guy's out of line. He thinks people will praise him just because he lives recklessly." Marlon is an undisciplined wild child. Burt, whose career rested not on luck but on work and principle, couldn't abide Brando's contempt. In a 1963 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Burt couldn't hide his anger when Brando's name came up. Marlon is an undisciplined wild child. He doesn't understand what hard work really means, Burt said, eyes locked straight into the camera as if facing Brando himself. Has he ever thought about people like me who sacrifice for the work, for the art? Brando just lives in indulgence. That wasn't just a public jab, it kicked off a long, quiet war between the two, and it had only just begun. In 1964, when Marlon Brando starred in The Godfather, one of the towering films of his career, Burt couldn't hold back. Herbert Marshall of Variety recorded Burt's remarks. "I don't understand why Hollywood exalts someone like Brando. He isn't just undisciplined, he's the ugly face of the movie industry. He's got nothing but rebellion, and that contributes nothing to art." Marlon is a symbol of destruction. When Brando heard this, he didn't sit still either. According to industry insiders, he laughed and told friends, "Burt will never get me. He's just a warhorse strapped into Hollywood's armor." That only enraged Burt further. The feud intensified in 1965 when they appeared together on a live television interview. On Hollywood Today, Burt was asked about Brando's lifestyle. He didn't hesitate. "Marlon is a symbol of destruction. He's not an artist. He's a self-deluded man lost in fantasies about himself. If Hollywood wants to honor people like that, I want no part of it." The comments shocked viewers and triggered a fierce reaction throughout the industry. Burt and Marlon never reconciled. Colleagues took notice, and Burt never feared speaking his mind, even if it set all of Hollywood buzzing. But with Brando, the rebellion was just a mask for professional shortcomings, recalled one friend. In the end, Burt and Marlon never reconciled. Their invisible war only deepened as Burt's hatred for Brando's lack of discipline grew. To Burt, it wasn't freedom. It was the destruction of everything cinema needed. Their feud wasn't just a fight between two stars. It was a stark display of clashing values and an ambition-fueled Hollywood. This story is only one part of Burt Lancaster's life, crowded with complicated relationships. Joan Crawford, who would force Burt into a battle. Joan Crawford pulling despicable tricks on him backstage. Hollywood, where the brightest stars draw not only adoring eyes but also envy and shadowy power, plays its most ruthless games behind the curtains. Burt Lancaster, proud of his professionalism and respect for colleagues, never imagined he'd had to confront a woman like Joan Crawford. Domineering and uncompromising, Joan was famous not only for her films but for her ugly backstage theatrics that left many in the industry weary, and Burt was among her most wounded victims. A nightmare throughout production. It began in 1956 when Burt and Joan worked together on Autumn Leaves. Though he knew Joan was difficult and a bit imperious, Burt never expected she'd become a nightmare throughout production. According to a crew member's account in The Hollywood Reporter, on day one, Joan demanded a retake simply because she didn't like Burt's performance. Burt pushed back, insisting the scene didn't need another retake, but Joan wouldn't listen. She went ballistic and hurled a chair against the wall. Tensions ran so high, the set had to pause for several minutes. Never gave a chance to shine. That was just one of countless disruptions. She kept making things hard for Burt, criticizing his wardrobe, nitpicking every detail of his preparation. Joan never let Burt have a chance to shine. She found any excuse to call him out in public, said a close colleague. Burt never made a scene, but that didn't mean he wasn't humiliated every time she did it. But Joan didn't stop at public jabs. A reliable source from the set revealed that she started playing dirty backstage. When Burt requested adjustments to a scene for technical reasons, Joan quietly pressured the director, getting last-minute script changes designed to embarrass him. She manipulated everything, turning each shooting day into a battle. She made Burt and the entire crew suffer in a suffocating atmosphere, a staffer recalled. Exposing Joan's dirty tricks. Burt Lancaster, however, wasn't one to swallow injustice. He had always respected the work of his colleagues, but Joan went too far. He couldn't let it continue, remembered a close industry friend, so Burt took action. In a 1957 interview with Variety, he didn't hesitate to expose Joan's dirty tricks. Hollywood isn't a place for people like Joan Crawford who don't understand real work. She doesn't respect those around her, only wants to control everything her way. She turned our set into hell. The public criticism rattled Joan's reputation. Many in the business began to see her differently. But Joan wasn't easily beaten. Joan knew Burt had told the truth, said an industry source, but she kept walking like an untouchable star as if it was all part of the game. A war of opposing principles. Their clash wasn't merely a workplace spat, it was a war of opposing principles. Joan Crawford, with all her domineering tactics and dirty games, forced Burt, a man of pride and professional respect, to stand his ground. Their relationship wasn't just a professional struggle, it was Burt's declaration of the values he refused to abandon. But Hollywood feuds don't end there. Although Burt vowed never to work with Joan again, the industry held plenty more battles. Tony Curtis, one of the most notable war. Two major stars, two warriors in a Hollywood world rife with competition and storms. Tony Curtis, fierce professional rivalry, drove them to court. When Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis collaborated on the film Sweet Smell of Success in 1957, the atmosphere on set immediately grew unbearably tense. Although both were talented, famous Hollywood stars, their differences in working style and professional outlook sparked an irreconcilable clash. The power struggle. Tony Curtis, with his free-spirited nature and emphasis on creativity, couldn't stand the strictness and absolute discipline Burt demanded. Their relationship wasn't just about work disagreements, it was a power struggle. The two could not reconcile. Curtis, who believed Hollywood needed freshness and innovation, repeatedly criticized Lancaster for being too conservative. In a 1958 interview with Variety, Curtis didn't hesitate to publicly slam Burt. "He's like a machine, always demanding perfection. We're not men of the past. Hollywood needs refreshers, those who can break the mold, not people clinging to what's old." Feeling insulted and disrespected. These words not only offended Lancaster but struck at the pride of a man who took great satisfaction in professionalism and discipline. Feeling insulted and disrespected, Burt began avoiding Curtis and refused to work with him on future projects. Their encounters were no longer collegial, they became tense standoffs filled with disdainful looks and veiled barbs. Both started steering clear of each other. At parties, events, and press gatherings, their relationship deteriorated beyond repair. Their on-set spats. By late 1959, the feud between Lancaster and Curtis had become a hot topic across Hollywood. Their on-set spats ceased to be internal matters and became media focal points. Curtis's accusations about Burt's lack of creativity were widely publicized, escalating the tension. Matters reached a boiling point when a lawsuit erupted. Burt and Tony couldn't resolve differences over contract terms and authority in production. By March 1960, the case officially went to court. A power struggle between stars. In a Los Angeles courtroom, the dispute wasn't just about financial terms, but also about control over the final product. Their conflicting views on working methods turned the confrontation into more than a personal battle. It was a power struggle between stars. As the trial unfolded, reporters buzzed with speculation. A Hollywood reporter ran a lengthy piece observing, "Hollywood may have lost a valuable collaboration, but the battle between Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis has unleashed an unstoppable storm. The film industry now faces a profound internal problem." No longer friends. The commentary drew public and industry attention, making the case one of the biggest scandals in Hollywood history. After the lawsuit, although Tony Curtis continued a successful career, the wounds it left meant he and Burt could never be friends. The deep sense of insult kept Lancaster from ever collaborating with Curtis again, and their relationship became a symbol of irreconcilable tension in show business. "Tony Curtis is just an arrogant star with no professional responsibility," Burt remarked after the case in an interview with the Los Angeles Times. "He doesn't understand the value of dedication and professionalism at work." The lawsuit between Burt Lancaster and Tony Curtis wasn't merely a contract dispute, it became a symbol of power struggles, arrogance, and disrespect in the film industry. Yet this story was only one among countless confrontations Burt faced in his career. Burt Reynolds, the rising star who made Burt Lancaster feel left behind. In the 1970s, as Reynolds emerged as a new Hollywood phenomenon, the industry's atmosphere changed instantly. With his bold, magnetic acting style and willingness to take risks, Reynolds quickly dominated blockbuster action films like Deliverance in 1972, The Longest Yard in 1974, and Smokey and the Bandit in 1977. This not only stirred the film world, but also startled heavyweights like Burt Lancaster. Reynolds became the new star, overshadowing everyone, and that made Burt Lancaster feel abandoned by the career to which he had devoted his life. Once an icon of action cinema, Burt was no longer the draw he used to be. "I used to be the star of these action films. What's left for me now?" Not just professional rivalry. This question haunted Lancaster, who struggled with the industry's rapid transformations. For a star who'd been the center of attention, watching someone else take his place left him insecure and deeply wounded. But the relationship between Lancaster and Reynolds wasn't just professional rivalry, quickly turned into a tense, covert battle. Reynolds not only surpassed Burt Lancaster career-wise, but also openly criticized his elder. In a 1978 interview with The Hollywood Reporter, Reynolds bluntly declared, "Burt isn't the only one in Hollywood who knows how to make action films anymore. His time is past." The air between them was taut. These words were a punch to Lancaster's pride, souring their relationship and intensifying the tension. Burt, who viewed work as devotion and respected professionalism, couldn't tolerate such disrespect. Whenever they met at parties or film events, the air between them was taut, as if in a silent contest for influence and star power. Colleagues took notice. A close friend of Lancaster revealed, "Every time Burt Lancaster and Reynolds meet, it's a Cold War. Burt hates how Reynolds not only took his spot, but also challenged everything he built over his career." The sense of being left behind. Those years saw hushed wars of words and quiet retaliations. Though Lancaster tried to remain composed, Reynolds' jabs kept piercing his pride. "Every time we meet again, I feel like I'm slipping backward, like no one sees me the same," Burt confided to an industry friend. "He hasn't just taken over the business, he's made me feel like I'm yesterday's man." As Reynolds landed lucrative deals Burt once coveted, the sense of being left behind grew starker. Burt wasn't just losing opportunities, he felt himself fading from audience memory. "What's left for me when Hollywood only wants stars like him?" he asked himself in those helpless years. The rivalry between Burt Lancaster and Burt Reynolds wasn't confined to tense encounters or interviews. It became a symbol of Lancaster's career regression. He was no longer Hollywood's coveted man, but this wasn't the end of Hollywood's battles. Rock Hudson, a heated and complex relationship. Rumors about sexuality that strained his relationship with Lancaster. Rock Hudson, the famed leading man with striking good looks, the silver screen gentleman who made countless women swoon, harbored a major secret about his sexuality that Hollywood always tried to conceal. Though Hudson never spoke publicly, rumors of romantic ties with other male actors made Burt Lancaster, who held extremely conservative views on sexuality, unable to tolerate him. Burt, strict and conservative in every respect, especially on sexuality, felt not just displeasure, but genuine hatred toward Rock Hudson for keeping his private life hidden. "Hollywood isn't a place to hide such filthy secrets," Burt bluntly told a close industry friend. "That kind of fake living, entering this business only to build a deceptive image, I can't stand it." Burt couldn't abide Hudson's ambiguity. To Burt, Hudson wasn't merely a gay star. He embodied weakness and a lack of virtue, qualities Burt could never condone. Proud of traditional values, Burt couldn't abide Hudson's ambiguity. The rumors of same-sex relationships only fueled Burt's anger. Men like Hudson, pretending to be gentlemen while hiding filth, Hollywood doesn't need people like that, Burt shared in a mid-1960s interview. Burt's hatred didn't stop at public remarks. An industry source revealed, "Burt doesn't just hate Rock for his sexuality, he hates how Rock maintains a false facade about his personal life." To Burt, Hollywood had to be clear, not a place for constructing false images or joining the industry to hide the truth. Life philosophies. Their relationship wasn't merely homophobia, it was a clash of diametrically opposed life philosophies. Hudson chose silence, avoiding public confrontation, which only made Burt more furious and more prejudiced. "A real man would never live in such ambiguity," Burt told a friend. Hollywood needs transparency, and Hudson represents everything I don't want to see in this industry. The spreading rumors. The story grew more complicated as rumors spread that Burt himself had once had a same-sex relationship with a famous male actor in his youth. The relationship allegedly ended in humiliation, and Burt never wanted to face those memories. From these wounds, Burt carried a deep-seated resentment toward homosexuality. These secrets only intensified his extremism and contempt for Rock Hudson, and for those he viewed as deceptive. The relationship between Burt Lancaster and Rock Hudson reflected not just homophobia, but the clash between rigid conservatism and a changing Hollywood. Burt felt threatened by truths he didn't want to accept, and Hudson, with all his ambiguity, became an easy target for that hatred. Their story wasn't merely personal, it symbolized Hollywood's buried secrets. Lee Marvin, the inevitable confrontation. When they worked together on The Professionals in 1966, their relationship had never truly been harmonious, and this remark marked the depth of Burt's loathing for Marvin. Lee Marvin, with his freewheeling lifestyle and defiant attitude, offended Burt from the outset. Marvin relished breaking rules, living freely, and being nonchalant about work. Burt, disciplined and perfectionist, couldn't stand Marvin's methods. To Burt, Marvin was a lazy man who disrespected the craft, fuel for his growing animosity. Passing through a dozen checkpoints. In a 1967 Variety interview, Marvin didn't hesitate to publicly jab at Burt. Burt's the kind of guy you have to pass through a dozen checkpoints to work with. I don't like that. The words were a slap in Burt's face, leaving him not only angry but deeply hurt. To Burt, this wasn't just about work style. It was an attack on the pride of a man who had given everything to his profession. In his eyes, Marvin didn't value the work, treating it like a game, which only intensified Burt's hatred. Opposing views of life. Their relationship wasn't simply a difference in working methods. It was a battle between two opposing views of life. Burt quietly thought Marvin is a saboteur. He doesn't know how to work seriously and lacks discipline, the very things I value most. Whenever they met, whether on or off set, Burt felt insulted. To him, Marvin wasn't just irresponsible. He challenged the very values Burt had built his entire career upon. A series of public spats. The Lancaster-Marvin standoff became irreparable as it dragged through the late 1960s. Though they occasionally joined the same projects, the tension never eased. Nothing changed in Marvin's approach, and Burt could no longer bear how Marvin treated work as a joke. Their relationship became not only a series of public spats, but a war between two Hollywood poles, a conservative, serious man, and a free spirit who followed no mold. Their confrontation remains one of Hollywood's most notable feuds. It reflected not only differences in work style, but symbolized the broader clash between traditional values and new trends in the film industry. Charlton Heston, conservative politics and the public battle between two old friends. Charlton Heston, a towering Hollywood star known for Ben-Hur (1959) and Planet of the Apes (1968), stood as one of the industry's most prominent conservatives. Beyond his acting, he was outspoken in politics, defending gun rights, military strength, and traditional values. His firm positions made him a powerful voice against the liberal movements that swept through Hollywood in the late 1960s. Burt Lancaster, equally towering in stature but devoted to progressive ideals, fought tirelessly for social equality, peace, and human rights. Once close colleagues who had shared the screen in successful collaborations, their friendship began to fracture when political divisions grew impossible to ignore. The breaking point came in 1968 at a glittering MGM party. Condemning the causes Lancaster held dear. Amid champagne glasses and studio chatter, Heston suddenly condemned the causes Lancaster held dear. Those movements only bring destruction and disorder to society. We are dismantling the very foundations of this country, he declared. The words chilled the room. For Lancaster, it was more than a political stance. It was a direct insult to the values he had given his life to defending. Unable to contain himself, Lancaster fired back. "You don't understand what's happening in society. What you're saying is no different from reactionary voices trying to preserve oppression." His anger was raw, his disappointment profound. In that moment, a friendship dissolved. Trading quiet jabs through the press. From then on, Lancaster and Heston avoided each other at events, trading quiet jabs through the press instead of reconciliation. Their rift came to symbolize Hollywood's deeper divide. Conservatives clinging to old traditions, progressives pushing for change. What had begun as a personal bond ended as an unbridgeable gulf, two icons locked in a battle that reflected the very soul of America's culture war. Elizabeth Taylor, the complicated affair that made Burt Lancaster feel pushed aside. The last name on the list is Elizabeth Taylor. The legendary Hollywood star captivated everyone, not only with her beauty, but also with her irresistible charm. Even as a major star of Hollywood itself, Burt Lancaster couldn't help but feel his heart to stir for her. However, their friendship gradually became complicated. One thing Burt always tried to hide was the deep affection he had for Elizabeth, but that love was never returned. For the man Elizabeth truly loved was Richard Burton, and that left Burt feeling pushed aside in a Hollywood he once dominated. The growing attachment. Burt's feelings for Elizabeth were far from simple. Though he never openly confessed them, their warm conversations and collaborations on screen made him feel a growing attachment. Everything changed when Elizabeth began her romance with Richard Burton. This relationship not only shook Hollywood, but also left Burt with the painful sense of being forgotten. She was the queen of Hollywood, and I was nothing more than a shadow in her presence. Though he never admitted it, this thought reflected Burt's deepest feelings as he watched Elizabeth belong to Burton. Losing both his career and his personal life. For Burt, a beloved and successful star, being overshadowed by another man made him feel as though he was losing both his career and his personal life. The Elizabeth Burton romance quickly captured the public's imagination, drawing all the media spotlight and leaving Burt in the shadows, even though he had invested so much of his heart in her. When Burton and Taylor married, a scandalous event at the time, Burt couldn't help but feel left behind. The tender on-screen moments and playful laughter they once shared now remained only as memories, while Elizabeth gave all her attention to Richard. For Burt, this shift was a devastating emotional blow. He couldn't understand why the woman he loved had chosen another man, and that confusion grew into a bitterness he could no longer hide. A wound in Burt's heart. The romantic disappointment became a wound in Burt's heart, a pain that made him feel he no longer had a place in the Hollywood he had given so many years to. While Taylor and Burton rose to become Hollywood's most adored power couple, Burt could only stand on the sidelines, watching the woman he loved belong to someone else. The sense of being pushed aside wasn't just about love, it seeped into his career as well. Producers began favoring Burton and Taylor, making them the center of attention. Elizabeth's presence at any event made Burt feel diminished. From blockbuster films to interviews, everything revolved around them, leaving Burt with the painful feeling of being cast aside. And so, the relationship between Burt Lancaster and Elizabeth Taylor was no longer the friendly, professional bond it once was. Burt's unrequited love gradually turned into a quiet rivalry, where love could never become reality, and Burton's dominance ensured their relationship would never be repaired. If you've watched the video till here, that means you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe. Don't forget to turn on the notifications bell icon